Hey, I just finished, well, actually, it was about 2 weeks ago now. I finished this book, When Breath Becomes Air, which is written by a guy called Paul Kalanithi. Paul Kalanithi was a neurosurgeon, and by all I've read about him, an excellent neurosurgeon. But just as he was about to complete his residency and actually become a neurosurgeon, and was being offered millions of dollars, and everything would have been great, and everything he'd worked towards for decades would have happened. Um, just as that was on the plate, he'd been diagnosed with cancer, and he did actually die um, before he made it. The guy was the book's really, really good. I mean, it's beautifully written. The guy was into literature and he was into philosophy and he was obsessed by death, which is why he so relished being a neurosurgeon, even though when he was younger, he said he'd never go into medicine because his older brother was a doctor, as was his father, and they were so busy and that wasn't the life he wanted. Um, and then he does go into being a neurosurgeon, but it's this is an excellent book. I mean, it entertains, it's very moving, it's very touching. It actually ends with a short letter, I guess, he's written to his daughter, 8 months old at the time, when he died. And that's just really moving. I'm obviously not going to read it to you because it will spoil things. And then there's an epilogue by his wife, and they were going through some marital uh, difficulties before he was diagnosed with cancer. So one of the jokes the guy's got a sense of humor. Whilst he's dying, he cracks jokes. Is maybe the best therapy for relationships in trouble is for one of you to get a terminal illness. Well, there you go. There's so much in this book. You get an insight into what it's like to be a neurosurgeon, the kind of lifestyle, and that's really interesting because everybody thinks, "Oh my God, neurosurgeon, amazing." Well, I don't know if everybody does, but amazing job, so clever, so well paid, blah blah blah, all this prestige. It sounds like a horrible job. The hours are insane, and the stress is enormous. And there's an ethos within neurosurgery that you have to be the best at everything, so the pressure is never ending. He even says in here at one point, a lot of his friends, as they got to the end of their education, they chose things like dermatology. Well, what they were going to specialize in, they chose things which were less work, more money, easy. And he said, brilliant line in there. He said, but that's how you choose a job, not a calling. So for him, this was a calling. Um, and the way he describes it when he's doing it, it's amazing. There's a scene where he writes about going into a neurosurgery ward, and he met a guy, an old guy sitting there who looked a bit distant. And when he walked in, the guy was just shouting, not shouting, speaking frantically in numbers. And it turned out to be a form of aphasia, which is damage to these parts of the brain that deal with speech. And he couldn't actually say what he wanted to say. All he could do was blurt out numbers. So he went in and he stayed with him for a bit after all the other surgeons left and all the other students left. And he tells the story of how he just became more and more panicked and more frantic, shouting out these numbers, becoming more and more distressed because he couldn't explain what he wanted to say. And then he says he took that message to the grave with him. So just little things like that. Really, really incredible book. He writes beautifully as well. I mean, one thing I like about books is that you can learn a bit more vocabulary, and it's not just because I want to be, the dictionary. The more words you have, I think, the better you're able to think and conceptualize the world and imagine things. And it's like when you train your body to do a new thing, you make it more capable. When you train your brain to categorize a new concept with a new word, it becomes more capable. That's what I think anyway. And life becomes more richer like that. I'd give this book 10 out of 10 straight away. I mean, the guy, when I was reading this, going back to what I just said, I probably picked up about 10 new words, and I thought I had a good vocabulary. So that was a bonus just in itself. 10 out of 10. You should definitely read it. Let me see what it says on the back. Shortlisted for the Wellcome Book Prize 2017. What do you do when life is catastrophically interrupted? What does it mean to have a child as your own life fades away? What makes life worth living in the face of death? Wow, I hadn't even read the back. So I bought this book about 3-4 years ago for my sister's birthday. I went into a bookshop. I picked up 4 or 5 that looked interesting. I started browsing them. I actually read the whole damn thing before I left the shop. It was that good. But sort of, it was a long time ago. I wasn't reviewing books back then, and then my wife got it, and I thought, wow, I've got to read this book again. Definitely worthwhile. And so some of the great things he says in here. He's talking about brain surgery, and it's ever so engaging, and you're in the zone. Everybody talks about zone there. And he says, you can be performing an operation, and the positions of the hands on the clock are actually irrelevant. And then it says it reminds him of Schrodinger's assertion that boredom is simply the awareness of time passing. Read it. It's really good. This is one of a handful of books I consider to be a universal donor. I would recommend it to anyone. Anne Patchett, don't know who that is. Extraordinary, remarkable, luminous, lyrical, intimate, insistent, and profound. Kalanithi had the mind of a polymath and the air of a poet. Yes. Brilliant writer, air of a poet, definitely. Daily Telegraph. I don't like the Daily Telegraph, but that's a good review. So there you go. I think 5 minutes of me talking is more than enough, so definitely read the book. Highly recommend it.